What I'm about to tell you is a story that NASA has buried so deep in their classified archives that only 3 people on Earth still have access to the original files. The 4th person who knew the complete truth took his own life in 1997, leaving behind only a single photograph and a note that read some doors should never be opened. In 1976, during the height of the Cold War space race, the Soviet Union launched what they claimed was a routine communications satellite. They called it Cosmos 961, but that was a lie. The satellite had a different name, a different purpose, and a destination that defied everything we thought we knew about physics and the nature of reality itself. The real mission was called Project Icarus, and it was the most classified operation in Soviet space history. Not even the Politburo knew its true purpose. Only a handful of scientists at the secret facility in Plesetsk were aware that they weren't just launching another piece of Cold War hardware into orbit. They were sending humanity's first messenger into the heart of a dying star. But let me start at the beginning, because the origins of this nightmare stretch back much further than 1970-6. In 1947, the same year of the Roswell incident, Soviet astronomers detected something impossible in the Vega system. Their radio telescopes picked up structured signals coming from inside Vega itself. Not from planets orbiting the star, not from space around it, but from within the stellar core where temperatures reach 15 million degrees Celsius, where nothing should be able to exist, let alone transmit organized information. The signals weren't random cosmic noise. They followed mathematical patterns, prime number sequences, even what appeared to be architectural blueprints. The Soviet scientists couldn't make sense of most of it. But one thing was clear: something intelligent was living inside that star, and it was trying to communicate. For nearly 30 years, the Soviets monitored these transmissions, slowly building a picture of what they were dealing with. The signals suggested the existence of structures, vast geometric forms that somehow maintained their integrity within plasma heated to unimaginable temperatures. Whoever or whatever was sending these messages had mastered technologies that made human science look like Stone Age cave paintings. By 1975, the Soviet Scientific Committee made a decision that would haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. They would attempt contact. Project Icarus was born from this decision. The satellite they launched wasn't designed to orbit Earth or even travel to another planet. It was built with experimental technology reverse-engineered from the mysterious signals themselves. The craft incorporated materials and design principles that shouldn't have been possible with 1970s technology. Dr. Vladimir Petrov, the lead scientist on the project, later wrote in his private journal that building the satellite felt like assembling a puzzle designed by gods for children who had not yet learned to walk. The construction process was plagued by accidents and unexplained phenomena. Workers reported tools that would become too hot to touch even when not in use. Metal components that would arrange themselves into different configurations overnight, and strange dreams shared by multiple team members. But the strangest part was the satellite's navigation system. Instead of conventional rockets and guidance computers, it used what Petrov called sympathetic resonance drives. The satellite would somehow follow the signals back to their source, riding the invisible currents of communication like a salmon, swimming upstream to spawn. The launch took place on December 21, 1976, at exactly midnight Moscow time. What happened next was recorded in detail, but the records make for disturbing reading. Initially, everything proceeded normally. The satellite separated from its launch vehicle and began its journey toward Vega. But within 72 hours, Mission Control in Plesetsk started receiving telemetry data that made no sense. The satellite was accelerating far beyond what its fuel reserves should have allowed. It was traveling faster than any human-made object had ever moved, approaching significant fractions of the speed of light. More disturbing were the images the satellite began transmitting back to Earth. At first, they showed normal deep space photography, starfields, and cosmic dust clouds. But as the craft approached the Vega system, the images began to change. The photographs showed structures, impossible structures floating in the vacuum of space around Vega. geometric forms that hurt to look at directly. The shapes seemed to exist in more dimensions than human vision could process. Team members who studied the images for too long reported severe headaches, nightmares, and in 3 cases, complete mental breakdowns. But this was nothing compared to what came next. On March 15, 1977, the satellite's final transmission began. The craft had somehow penetrated Vega's outer atmosphere and was falling toward the stellar core. This should have been impossible. Any material object approaching a star would be vaporized long before reaching the surface. Yet the satellite not only survived, but continued transmitting. The final image it sent back to Earth was a photograph that would destroy the sanity of everyone who saw it unfiltered. The photograph showed the interior of Vega, but it wasn't the roiling plasma hell that physics textbooks describe. Instead, the image revealed a vast hollow space within the star, like an enormous cathedral carved from living fire. Suspended within this impossible architecture were structures that defied description. Crystalline formations that pulsed with their own inner light, organic-looking passages that seemed to breathe, and geometric shapes that appeared to move and shift even in the still photograph. But the most disturbing element of the image wasn't the alien architecture, it was the figures. Moving through this stellar cathedral were beings that no human eye should ever have witnessed. Tall, impossibly thin silhouettes that seemed to be composed of the star's own plasma, yet maintained distinct individual forms. They appeared to be conducting some kind of ritual or ceremony around a central structure that looked disturbingly familiar. The central structure was a replica of the satellite itself, perfect in every detail, but scaled up to enormous proportions. The plasma beings were arranged around this giant satellite in concentric circles, their forms raised in what could only be described as worship or supplication. Dr. Petrov was the first to examine the unfiltered image. He stared at it for 17 minutes without speaking, then calmly walked to his office, wrote his resignation letter, and shot himself in the head. His final words, dictated to his secretary just hours before, they were expecting us. They knew we were coming. They built a temple to welcome us home. The remaining team members didn't fare much better. Within 6 months, 2 more had committed suicide. Another had been committed to a psychiatric facility, and the rest had requested immediate transfers to other projects. The official report listed the cause of the mission's termination as catastrophic, equipment failure resulting in total loss of spacecraft. But the story doesn't end there. In 1997, 20 years after the mission's end, something extraordinary happened. Radio telescopes around the world simultaneously detected a new signal from the Vega system. But this wasn't coming from inside the star, like the original transmissions. This was coming from Earth orbit. The signal was being broadcast by what appeared to be the original Icarus satellite, somehow returned from its journey into Vega and now circling our planet once every 93 minutes. The transmission consisted of a single image, repeated continuously. It was the same photograph of the stellar cathedral, but with one crucial difference. The giant replica satellite at the center of the alien temple was no longer empty. Standing inside it, clearly visible despite the image quality, was a human figure. A man in a Soviet space program uniform, his face turned toward the camera with an expression of absolute terror. The figure was identified through facial recognition software as Dr. Vladimir Petrov, the project leader who had supposedly killed himself 20 years earlier. NASA and other space agencies have been tracking the returned satellite ever since. It maintains a perfect orbit, never deviating from its path, continuously broadcasting its impossible message. Several attempts have been made to communicate with it or bring it down for study, but all have failed. The satellite seems to exist in normal space but follows laws of physics that don't apply to anything else in our reality. The most disturbing development came just 5 years ago. Long-range telescopic observation revealed that the satellite isn't empty. There's someone inside it, visible through what appears to be a viewing port. A human figure in a Soviet spacesuit, motionless but clearly alive, staring down at Earth with the same expression of terror captured in that final photograph. The figure never moves, never ages, never responds to attempts at communication. It simply watches our planet with eyes that have seen the impossible interior of a star and lived to remember it. Today, if you know where to look in the night sky and have access to the right equipment, you can see it for yourself. A tiny point of light that shouldn't exist, carrying a passenger who died 20 years before he was born, broadcasting evidence of structures and beings that live in the hearts of stars. The satellite that sent its last image from inside. A star never really died. It just learned that some journeys don't have a destination, they have a purpose. And sometimes, the purpose is to bring something back with you. Something that's been waiting inside the fire for millions of years. Patient as starlight, watching Earth through human eyes that have seen too much and can never close again. The next time you look up at the night sky, remember that we're not alone. We're being watched, and the watchers live in places where physics breaks down and reality becomes just another word for the impossible. The satellite is still up there, still broadcasting, still carrying its terrified passenger on an endless orbit around the world, and every 93 minutes it passes overhead, sending its message to anyone willing to listen. The message is simple: we found them, they were waiting for us, and now they're coming home.